My name is Felicia Lawson, and I'm a 42-year-old nurse from Asheville, North Carolina. What I'm about to share with you is my near-death experience testimony of what happened when Jesus showed me the shocking truth about Psalm 23. I really saw how Psalm 23, when implemented and understood correctly, can literally change our life. This began on February 17, 2019, when a devastating car accident nearly took my life. But before we start, please let me know where you're listening from. It will be nice to feel closer, even if we're physically apart. Also, don't forget to like and comment on what you thought about this near-death experience testimony. Let's have a fair and open discussion so we can learn from each other on this channel. Enjoy listening. The day started like any other. The roads were icy from an overnight freeze, and as I set out for my early shift, I recited a quick prayer for safety, not knowing what lay ahead. I was navigating a steep hill about 10 minutes from the hospital when everything happened in flashes: sudden headlights around a dangerous curve, the unsettling feeling of my tires losing traction, and my desperate struggle to regain control. In a split second, all became darkness. I later learned that my car had slid into oncoming traffic and was struck directly on the driver's side. The impact was catastrophic, leaving me with severe internal injuries, a ruptured aorta, and traumatic brain injury. Later, the medical team told me that by all accounts, I shouldn't have survived even the first few minutes. Then, in the space between life and death, everything shifted. One moment I was caught in the chaos of the accident, and the next, I found myself detached from the turmoil below. I remember a sensation of floating, of being gently lifted out of chaos and pain into perfect peace. There was no fear, only a profound sense of clarity unlike anything I had ever known. I could see my broken body below me, surrounded by medical staff working frantically, their voices muted as if coming from a great distance. I felt no attachment to the scene unfolding beneath me. Instead, I was drawn toward a warm, radiant light that seemed to envelope me completely. As I moved toward it, I became aware of a presence, loving, powerful, and utterly familiar, though I had never seen him before. And then he was there. Jesus. Not as I had imagined him from Sunday school pictures or movie portrayals, but real and gloriously alive. His eyes held depths of compassion that seemed to know everything about me, every struggle, every joy, every secret thought, and loved me completely. "Felicia," he said, and my name in his voice felt like coming home. "You have questions." It wasn't a question, but a statement of understanding. And he was right. In that moment, all the questions I had carried through life, about purpose, about suffering, about why faith sometimes felt so difficult, rose to the surface of my consciousness. "Why am I here?" Jesus smiled. "Walk with me," he said, extending his hand. As I placed my hand in his, the scene around us transformed. We were standing in a lush, green meadow that stretched as far as I could see. The grass beneath our feet was vibrant and alive, swaying gently in a breeze I could feel but not hear. In the distance, I could see crystal-clear waters reflecting light in ways that made them appear almost alive. "Do you recognize this place?" Jesus asked. I looked around, feeling a strange sense of familiarity, though I was certain I had never been here before. "It feels like I should know it," I answered hesitantly. "These are the green pastures and still waters of the shepherd," he said. "Words you have read many times, but perhaps never truly seen." Suddenly I understood. "Psalm 23, I whispered. Jesus nodded. David wrote those words from his heart as a shepherd who understood what it means to care for his flock. But they are more than beautiful poetry, Felicia. They are a promise and a reality that most people never fully grasp during their earthly lives. As we walked through this heavenly landscape, Jesus began to unfold the deeper truths of Psalm 23 in ways that penetrated to the very core of my being. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want," he said. Felicia, when David wrote these words, he wasn't making a religious statement. He was declaring a relationship, intimate, personal, and completely transformative. To have a shepherd means to be known, to be led, to be protected. It means never having to find your own way through life's darkest valleys. As he spoke, I saw flashes of my own life, times when I had tried to handle everything myself, moments of exhaustion when I had pushed God to the margins, seasons when I had felt utterly alone despite knowing intellectually that God was present. I didn't understand, I said softly. I believed in you, but I didn't truly know what it meant to have a shepherd. Few do, Jesus replied. The world teaches self-reliance from the earliest age. Even within faith communities, there's often a hidden pressure to manage on your own, to have all the answers, to appear strong. But the first step to experiencing the fullness of my care is recognizing your need for a shepherd. We continued walking, and with each step, I felt myself absorbing truths that seemed both new and somehow ancient, as if my soul had always known them but my mind had never fully grasped them. I shall not want, Jesus continued. These words have been misunderstood by many. They are not a promise of material prosperity or a life free from difficulty. They are a declaration of sufficiency, that in me, you have everything you truly need. He paused and said, Felicia, how much of your life has been shaped by fear of not having enough? Enough money, enough time, enough love, enough security. The question pierced me deeply. I saw with perfect clarity how anxiety about enough had driven so many of my decisions, had robbed me of peace, had kept me striving when I could have been resting in God's provision. Most of it, I admitted. Even when things were good, I worried about the future. This is why David's declaration is so powerful, Jesus said. It's not just about physical provision, though I do care about those needs. It's about a soul-deep assurance that releases you from the grip of fear and want. We came to the edge of a crystal-clear stream. The water flowed with a gentle rhythm that seemed to create music without sound. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. As Jesus spoke these words, I felt a profound weariness that I hadn't even realized I was carrying begin to lift from my spirit. Your world values constant activity, productivity, achievement, Jesus said. Rest is seen as weakness or indulgence. But in my kingdom, rest is sacred. It is in stillness that souls are restored. I thought about my life, the perpetual busyness, the endless to-do lists, the way I collapsed into exhausted sleep most nights only to wake to more demands the next day. I can't remember the last time I truly rested, I confessed. And this is why so many of my children live with depleted spirits, Jesus replied. The green pastures and still waters aren't just poetic images, Felicia. They represent my invitation to regular, intentional rest in my presence, not as a reward for hard work, but as a necessary element of spiritual health. As he spoke, Jesus led me to sit beside the stream. The peace in that place was tangible, almost like a living thing that enveloped me completely. For what seemed like both an instant and an eternity, we simply sat in silence, and in that silence, I felt more profoundly known and loved than in all the words and affirmations I had ever received. This is what I offer, Jesus said finally. Not an absence of activity, but a presence of peace that sustains you through everything. Tears filled my eyes as I realized how rarely I had experienced this kind of profound rest, how I had mistaken brief distractions for true restoration. He restores my soul, Jesus continued. Soul restoration is more than emotional comfort, Felicia. It is the remaking of who you are at the deepest level. It is healing for wounds you may not even know you carry. With perfect clarity, I could see the wounds I had accumulated through life. Disappointments, betrayals, losses, failures, and even the small daily injuries that come from living in a broken world. I saw how these had shaped my reactions, my defenses, my fears. I didn't realize how broken I was, I whispered. Few do, Jesus replied. Most people become so accustomed to living with their wounds that they mistake their injured state for normal. But I see every hurt, every scar, and my desire is always restoration. As he spoke, I experienced waves of healing flowing through my entire being. Memories that had once carried pain were touched by something that didn't erase them but transformed their power over me. Places of bitterness softened. Old resentments dissolved. It was as if every dark corner of my soul was being illuminated and cleansed. This restoration isn't a one-time event, Jesus explained. It's an ongoing process, a continuous healing that happens as you walk with me. And the path of this healing is what David described next. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake, I said. Yes, Jesus nodded. The paths of righteousness aren't merely about following rules or meeting religious expectations. They are the ways of living that align with who I truly am and who you were created to be. As he spoke, I could see before us a path winding through the meadow, ascending gently toward distant mountains. Unlike the wide, crowded highways of the world, this path seemed intimately personal, as if designed specifically for individual journeys. When you follow this path, Jesus explained, you aren't just obeying commands, you're discovering your true identity as my beloved child. You're learning to live from a place of security rather than fear, generosity rather than scarcity, truth rather than deception. I thought about the times in my life when I had reduced righteousness to rule following, to moral performance that left me feeling either superior or ashamed depending on how well I thought I was doing. I think I misunderstood righteousness, I said. Many do, he said. But righteousness is not a standard you must achieve, it is a path you walk with me. And the purpose of this path is not to earn my approval but to reveal my character, for his name's sake. When you walk in my ways, the world sees me more clearly through you. As we continued our walk, the scenery began to change. The bright meadow gradually gave way to a shadowed valley. Steep cliffs rose on either side, and the path narrowed. Though there was still light, it was muted, creating a solemn atmosphere that felt heavy with significance. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Jesus spoke the words as we entered this valley, and I felt a momentary hesitation. The valley, though not terrifying, carried an undeniable sense of danger and uncertainty. Every life includes valleys, Felicia, Jesus said. Times of loss, grief, uncertainty, and yes, even death. I never promised my followers exemption from these valleys. What I promised was my presence within them. I thought about the accident that had brought me to this moment, the sudden intrusion of mortality into what had seemed an ordinary day. I thought about other valleys I had walked, the miscarriage in my second year of marriage, my father's prolonged battle with cancer, the year my son had struggled with depression. The valleys have been the hardest times to feel your presence, I admitted. Sometimes it seemed like you were distant or silent. And yet I was closer than ever, Jesus replied. In the valleys, I am not just your shepherd, I am your companion. Notice how the psalm shifts in this verse, from speaking about me to speaking to me. For you are with me. The valley is where relationships deepen from theology to intimacy. As we walked deeper into the valley, I became aware that Jesus was carrying a shepherd's rod and staff. He used them skillfully to guide our steps, occasionally moving aside obstacles or testing the stability of the path ahead. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me, I murmured, watching his movements. The rod and staff represent both my protection and my guidance, Jesus explained. The rod was used by shepherds to defend their sheep from predators. It represents my power to protect you from what would harm you. The staff was used to guide, to gently correct, and sometimes to rescue a sheep in danger. I thought about the different ways I had experienced God's guidance in my life, sometimes through gentle nudges of conscience or inspiration, other times through what had felt like painful redirection or discipline. I haven't always welcomed your corrections. Few do at the moment, Jesus replied. But a shepherd's correction is always motivated by love and protection, never by rejection or punishment. My discipline is not about making you pay for mistakes, it's about guiding you back to the path of life. As we continued through the valley, I noticed something unexpected. In a small clearing surrounded by towering cliffs was a table, beautifully set as if for a celebration. Fresh bread, wine, and an abundance of food covered its surface. Most surprisingly, seated around the table were shadowy figures that seemed to represent various challenges and difficulties I had faced in life. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies, Jesus said, gesturing toward the scene. Why would you set a feast here? I asked, why not wait until we're out of the valley, away from them? Because true provision isn't about the absence of challenges, it's about abundance in the midst of them, Jesus explained. I don't always remove difficulties, but I always provide strength to face them. The table represents my sustaining grace that feeds your spirit even in life's hardest seasons. As he spoke, I understood with new clarity how God's provision had manifested in my most difficult times, not always as an escape from problems but as strength, wisdom, and unexpected joy in the midst of them. I remembered moments of inexplicable peace during my father's final days, provision that arrived just when finances were most tight, and friendships that deepened during seasons of struggle. Jesus led me to the table and motioned for me to sit. As I did, he stood behind me and placed his hands on my head in a gesture of blessing. "You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows." I felt something warm and fragrant flowing over me, not physical oil but a sensation of being specially chosen, set apart, and honored. "The anointing oil represents my spirit poured out on your life," Jesus explained. In ancient times, guests of honor would be anointed with oil as a sign of welcome and esteem. Kings were anointed to signify their calling and authority. I closed my eyes, experiencing this spiritual anointing with every fiber of my being. It felt like being simultaneously cleansed and filled, recognized and commissioned. "And the overflowing cup?" I asked. Jesus placed a goblet in my hands. As I watched, it filled with clear water that rose to the rim and then continued to rise, forming a perfect dome above the cup without spilling a drop. "The overflowing cup represents the abundant life I offer," he said. "Not abundance as the world defines it through possessions or achievements, but the true abundance of purpose, joy, peace, and love that cannot be contained by circumstances." I stared at the impossibly full cup, understanding that it represented a life that defied natural limitations, a supernatural fullness that couldn't be explained by what was poured in. "I've settled for so much less," I whispered. "Many do," Jesus replied. "They accept a half-filled life when I offer overflow. They measure provision by what they can see rather than by who I am." As we left the table and continued our journey, the valley began to widen. Light became more abundant, and the path climbed gently upward. I felt different than when we had entered this place, stronger, more certain, filled with a peace that seemed unshakable. "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life," Jesus said as we walked. Curious, I glanced behind us and was startled to see two radiant figures following at a short distance. Though they had distinct appearances, both emanated power and grace beyond description. "Goodness and mercy," Jesus explained. "Not abstract concepts but active forces in the lives of those who walk with me. They follow you, not passively but in pursuit, ensuring that even the hardest circumstances ultimately work toward redemptive ends." I studied these figures with wonder. Goodness appeared strong and generous, ready to bring blessing and provision. Mercy seemed gentle yet resolute, carrying what looked like instruments of healing and restoration. "They follow me? Always. All the days of your life," Jesus confirmed. "Even when you cannot see them, even when circumstances seem to contradict their presence. They are my commitment to you, that nothing in your story will be wasted, that everything will ultimately be redeemed." As the path continued to ascend, I could see ahead of us a structure that appeared to be made of living light. It had the form of a house but seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, extending far beyond what my eyes could comprehend. "And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever," I said softly. "Yes," Jesus replied. "The final promise of the shepherd is not just provision for this life but eternal communion in the next. The house of the Lord is both a future hope and a present reality. Wherever my presence dwells, there is my house." As we approached this radiant dwelling, I felt an overwhelming sense of belonging, of coming home to a place I had never been but had always been made for. Every fiber of my being resonated with rightness, with a sense that this was the destination toward which my entire life had been moving, often without my conscious awareness. But as we drew nearer, something unexpected happened. Jesus stopped and turned to face me directly. "Felicia," he said, "it's not yet time for you to enter fully into this dwelling." Confusion and, I admit, a flash of disappointment ran through me. "But why show me if I can't stay?" "Because you needed to see what awaits, and because you have a message to carry back," Jesus answered. "You've experienced the reality of Psalm 23 in ways few have understood. This wasn't just for you, it was for those who will hear your story." As he spoke, I became aware of a pulling sensation, gentle but persistent, as if something was drawing me back from this place of perfect peace. "Your body is responding to treatment," Jesus explained, "and I have more for you to do in the world of the living." I felt tears forming. "I don't want to leave you," I whispered. Jesus took both my hands in his. "You aren't leaving me, Felicia. Everything you've experienced here, my guidance as shepherd, my provision, my protection, my presence, continues in your earthly life. The difference is that now you've seen it with spiritual eyes and can live from this truth, rather than just believing it intellectually. He placed his hand over my heart. Carry this experience back with you. Share the deeper truths of the shepherd's psalm with those who have reduced it to familiar words without experiencing its power. Tell them that I am more present, more engaged, more committed to their well-being than they have dared to believe. The pulling sensation grew stronger. The radiant landscape around us began to fade slightly, like a beautiful scene viewed through increasingly frosted glass. Will I remember everything? You will remember what is needed, Jesus assured me. Not every detail, perhaps, but the truth at the heart of each verse. And when you read these words again, they will reawaken what you've experienced here. As the scene continued to fade, Jesus spoke one final time, his voice somehow cutting through the growing distance between us. Remember, Felicia, I am your shepherd in every moment, in every circumstance. Not just in theory or theology, but in living reality. Let this transform how you live each day. And then there was a rushing sensation, a moment of darkness, and the overwhelming intrusion of physical sensation. Pain, beeping machines, voices speaking urgently, the feeling of tubes and wires connected to my body. I opened my eyes to the harsh lights of the ICU, feeling simultaneously the agony of my broken body and the lingering peace of where I had just been. The doctors called my recovery miraculous. By medical standards, I should not have survived the injuries I sustained. The trauma surgeon later told me that my heart had stopped 3 times during those critical first hours. Whatever you experienced while you were gone, he said, it sent you back with an extraordinary will to live. That was 6 years ago. My physical recovery was long and painful, multiple surgeries, months of rehabilitation, learning to walk again. But through it all, I carried something that transformed even the hardest days, the living reality of what I had experienced in those hours when my spirit had left my broken body. Psalm 23 was no longer just beautiful poetry to me. It had become the framework through which I understood my relationship with God and navigated every circumstance of life. When financial pressures mounted during my recovery, I shall not want wasn't a distant religious promise but a present reality I could lean into, a reminder that my shepherd's provision might not look like I expected but would always be sufficient. When exhaustion overwhelmed me during rehabilitation, he makes me lie down in green pastures became my permission to rest without guilt, to recognize my limitations not as weakness but as opportunities to experience God's restoration. When anxiety about the future threatened to consume me, he leads me beside still waters, called me back to the peace I had experienced beside that heavenly stream, a peace available not just in eternity but in present communion with my shepherd. When painful memories or bitterness tried to resurface, he restores my soul, reminded me of the deep healing I had experienced and continued to receive, a healing that worked from the inside out, addressing not just symptoms but root causes. When I faced difficult decisions about my future, whether I could return to nursing, how to manage ongoing physical limitations, he leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake, guided me to choices aligned not with the world's definition of success but with God's purpose for my life. When the anniversary of the accident brought darkness and grief over what had been lost, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, sustained me with the assurance that even in this valley, I was not alone. When well-meaning friends offered simplistic advice or judgment about my ongoing struggles, your rod and your staff, they comfort me, reminded me that my shepherd's guidance, not human opinion, was my true source of direction. When insurance battles and medical bills created stress that seemed overwhelming, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies, gave me confidence that God's provision would manifest even in the midst of these challenges. When I finally returned to part-time work at a rehabilitation center, using my own experience to help others through similar journeys, you anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows, became my daily experience of purpose and fulfillment beyond what I could have imagined before the accident. And through it all, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, has been my constant assurance that nothing, no pain, no setback, no difficulty, is wasted in God's economy. Everything is being worked together for redemptive purposes, even when I cannot see how. As for the final promise, I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever, it has transformed my relationship with mortality. The prospect of death, which once filled me with fear despite my faith, now holds a different meaning. I know firsthand that what awaits is not an unknown darkness, but a homecoming to the place my soul recognizes as its true dwelling. I share this story not to focus attention on my experience, but to offer what was given to me as a gift for others. Whether you receive my account as literal truth or meaningful metaphor matters less than what you do with the message at its heart. The Lord is your shepherd in ways more real, more present, and more transformative than most of us have dared to believe. The familiar words of Psalm 23 are not just poetic comfort for difficult times. They are an invitation to a relationship that changes everything: how you face challenges, how you receive blessings, how you understand your purpose, and how you anticipate eternity. I don't know what valley you may be walking through today. I don't know what enemies surround your table or what emptiness you're trying to fill. But I do know this: the shepherd who revealed himself to me during those hours between life and death is the same shepherd who watches over you. His goodness and mercy are pursuing you with relentless love. His rod and staff are ready to guide and protect you. His abundant provision awaits if you'll open your hands to receive it. Let the psalm become your present reality: the Lord is your shepherd. You shall not want.